Two Android powerhouses, but only one can win a dogfight battle. I'm Aaron Baker from PhoneDog.com, and today it's the LG G2 versus the HTC One. Let's put them together and see which one comes out on top. We do a lot of dogfight battles here at PhoneDog.com, and I'll be entirely honest with you, I do a ton of these things, and every single time I say this is the ultimate dogfight. But for real, this is the ultimate dogfight, or one of the ultimate dogfights of 2013, because as you go into the holiday season, you're going to have a ton of awesome Android handsets to choose from. It gets better and better every year, and that continuation comes along full circle with these two devices. This is the LG G2. It's available at AT&T, Sprint, available and or coming soon to AT&T, Sprint, T-Mobile, and Verizon, the big four carriers in the US, and this is the HTC One. Recently available on Verizon, been available for a while on AT&T, Sprint, and T-Mobile. This thing is a powerhouse. It continues to dominate on PhoneDog's official smartphone rankings, and the G2 is a newcomer with a lot to offer. So like any other dogfight, it's going to be challenging to figure out which one's the best. We're going to do it right now, my friends. Or actually, I should say in a two-part video. Not necessarily right this second, but by the end of the two-part video, we'll know for sure. Before I get too far into it, thanks to my partners at Best Buy Mobile for giving us devices like the G2 and the One for use in our giveaway game that we give to you for free on the site at PhoneDog.com. When you go into Best Buy Mobile to get either one of these devices, you'll walk out working. They'll get your email, your contacts, your web, all that stuff set up. So when you walk out the door, you're good to go. Let's do a tech rundown here and talk about the specifications of both of these devices. This is the G2. It's packing a 2.3 gigahertz quad-core Snapdragon 800 CPU, a 4.2-inch 1080p display that HD display that LG says. It's hard to say. HD display that LG says is for the most part edge to edge. There is some bezel space here, but not a whole lot. For the most part, it is relatively edge to edge, and you see that in day-to-day use with this device. But anyway, 5.2 inches here. LG also says that's the biggest a device display can be and still be one-handed according to their research. Whether that's true or not depends on the size of your hand, but 5.2 inches is where the sweet spot is, according to LG. 13 megapixel camera on the back with optical image stabilization and a 1080p HD video recording capability. You've got your volume rocker and your power button on the back here, and a little bit of a design difference from other devices on the market. 2 gigabytes of RAM, 32 gigabytes of internal storage, a 3000 milliamp hour non-removable battery on the G2, 4G LTE connectivity. This is the AT&T version. The Verizon version is also out, and the others are coming very soon. And this is packing Android 4.2 with LG's UI. HTC One, this thing is packing a 1.7 gigahertz quad-core Snapdragon 600 CPU. So 800, first US device to support the 800, available on multiple carriers. This Snapdragon 600 at 1.7 gigahertz. 2 gigabytes of RAM, 32 gigabytes of internal storage, 4G LTE. This is the Verizon version. I should point out with Verizon and 4G LTE logos here. 4 ultra-pixel camera with 1080p HD recording, a 4.7-inch 1080p HD display. And on the Verizon version, and exclusively on the Verizon version out of the box, Android 4.2 Jelly Bean with HTC Sense version 5. So much like the international version, you can rock Jelly Bean and the pretty, or I should say it's not the latest version, but pretty late version at Android 4.2 with Sense 5. The difference here, all metal build quality. If you look at these two devices, this is a really nice device. It's thin and light and it fits well in the hand, and I love the placement of the buttons. And to all those people that have asked me on Twitter, I have no problem keeping this in my pocket. It does not activate the buttons here on the back. I've got a ton of Twitter questions that go along the lines of, hey, when it's in your pocket, does your power button activate? Does it activate your volume rocker switch? Not in the slightest. I haven't had it happen to me once on the LG G2, but still a very plasticky device resembling Samsung's design language. HTC One is all metal, a gorgeous display here, and then a beautiful back as well with boom sound speakers on the front. So from a design perspective, the design, and while some people love plastic and some people love metal, the design goes to the HTC One. Even after months of being on the market, it is still the most beautiful Android device on the market right now. Now, that's a pro. There are plenty of cons. The display is smaller in comparison. Snapdragon 600 versus Snapdragon 800. So there are a couple of cons depending on what's most important to you, but we'll dive into that more in part 1 and part 2. So let's jump into the software, and before we do that, I want to give you a quick rundown of the hardware here. Micro SIM card slot over here on the left side, it's hard to see. Down here at the bottom, you've got your speakers, micro USB charging port, 3.5mm headphone jack over here on the side, or on the bottom side, I should say. Nothing over on this spine. Up here, watch on, infrared blaster, and of course on the back, your camera and an AT&T logo in this case. Up top here, 3.5mm headphone jack, power button which doubles as the IR blaster for HTC's TV service. You've got all metal with the exception of these little plastic areas right here and on the sides. Got your micro SIM card slot right there, micro USB charging port, breaking phones, and taking names. Volume rocker over here on the right side as well. So from an in-hand perspective with these two devices, this fits really well in the hand. I love the curved nature of the HTC One. This is still one of the most beautiful devices to fit in your hand and use on a regular basis and use for long phone calls. That said, I love the look and feel of this. The on-screen buttons are really nice. This thing is thin and light, and I am absolutely crazy about the buttons being on the back of the device. I think it's a great idea. Your finger naturally rests on the power button, and so it's fantastic. And even if you don't want to use that as your primary method of turning the device on and off, all you have to do is double tap the display to turn it on and off. You don't have to touch the buttons on the back at all. But if you want to, these double up as shortcuts, activating camera, and quick memo. Now let's go into the software here because they are very different. They're both running Android 4.2, but you'd be hard pressed to believe that because they look so different out of the box. You can see Sense 5 running right here, I should say, out of the gate. You've got 7 home screens over on this device that you can have. You've got 5 home screens over on the HTC One, one of which is HTC Blink Feed. Now we've talked about it at length in videos, and I'm not going to bore you too much with Blink Feed, but it's a news aggregation service, very similar to Flipboard on the Samsung devices, or actually you can get Flipboard on any phone, but very similar to the Flipboard partnership with Samsung, although on this, the HTC One and with Sense 5, you can't remove Blink Feed. You can't get rid of it. You can move it to, or I should say make this your home screen, for example, and knock it out of the home screen placement, but you can't completely disable Blink Feed or get rid of it. So it's always going to be right there, be somewhere around on the device. But you have a maximum of 5 home screens. Back when we talked to HTC about this, their research says that people, for the most part, don't use more than a couple of home screens, so they've cut back on the home screens and tried to make the overall experience better. Applications right here, and again, Android 4.2 on both of these devices, very different. You can see the typical carrier installed stuff here. Amazon, Amazon Kindle, Amazon MP3. I actually deleted most of the AT&T stuff on the G2, and at least on the G2 you can do that on the AT&T side. All the stuff, Navigator, let me think, what else? Navigator, Maps, all that jazz, gone on the AT&T G2, at least for now. But you can see, for example, Data Manager here. You can see AT&T Code Scanner, and just by clicking there, I can delete those and move on. Can't do that on the Verizon side over here, but you do get a couple of Verizon things like Caller Name ID, My Verizon Mobile, Hotspot, NFL Mobile, Verizon Tones, Video Calling, Voicemail, VZ Navigator, and VZ Security. And I like this. You've got the clock up here as a constant option. You can arrange them in alphabet or alphabetical order or by groups, as you can see here in custom configuration. And you can even do this. You can come in here and change the layout of the grid size. So 3x4, for example, if you want to make it a little bit different in overall size. Very similar over here as well. You can show large icons just by doing this. And there are my big icons, no longer small. I prefer small, so we're going to take it back to the smaller icons. Now you've got on-screen buttons here, and diving into the software a little bit more, both of these offer a wealth of personalization. So I'll go down through here just so you can quickly see between the notification bars. You've got Q Slide over here, which we'll talk about in part 2. It's the multitasking option on the G2, very similar to the multitasking options on the Galaxy Note 2 and now the Galaxy Note 3, but very different in a couple of ways. So we'll talk about that. I do like the ability to not only have the shortcuts up here, but the ability to edit those as you see fit. So for me, for example, I live in airplanes for work, so I'll bring airplane mode all the way up to the top, back out, and now airplane mode is at the far left for me to use as I see fit. Brightness, sound here as well. This is what the HTC One's notification bar looks like. I can either do that or I can bring my 2 fingers down, and in Android 4.2 style, I've got my shortcut to my Google Plus profile and all these little shortcuts with brightness and settings and more. So we'll jump into settings on both of these devices and take a look. Network, sound, display in general, all tabbed out here, very similar to TouchWiz. And you're going to see a lot of goodies on the G2 software-wise. A couple of goodies include Smart Screen, where the screen stays on, Smart Video. You've seen these features before on the Galaxy S4 and other Samsung devices. The notification LED is here as well. And what I like is the notification LED is up here on the top on the G2, but it's also on the back behind the power button and just above the volume up button. So you've got this little button that lights up as well. So when you have the device face down, this will light up. And then of course, if you have it right side up, it'll show you over here on this side as well. So really nice feature there. Very similar to the Droid DNA with that dual LED that you may remember when we covered it on PhoneDog.com, but a lot of software goodies here. Over on this side, you've got some nice personalization choices as well. Wallpaper, lock screen style, including the ability to use widgets on the home screen. For example, Gmail, if I want to, I'll come in here and select Gmail. Let's go back and do CNN Small. We'll do Top Stories. And what should happen is when I turn it off and back on, CNN is right there in my lock screen on the HTC One. Over here on this device, lock screen, a couple of different options, including the ability, kind of a nice little wealth of options. Screen swipe effect, particle, crystal, white hole, dewdrop, and what that does is it changes the animation for when you come in and you unlock the device itself. Double tap. That animation right there that you're seeing, it changes that. And very similarly, you can change this animation as well of swiping back and forth. Stay tuned for part 2. We'll pick up with the customization stuff and then we'll carry over into some speed tests and more to determine which one of these devices is the must-have Android phone. Stay tuned for part 2.